Ever since we were kids, I, like everyone else in the pack, had harbored a crush on the future alpha, but not everyone's feelings matched the depth of mine. We barely exchanged words, just that one accidental collision. And yet, he never seemed to notice me, even though I couldn't help but stare at him endlessly. He consumed my thoughts like a wildfire. Maybe it was obsessive, but no matter what I tried, I couldn't stop daydreaming about him. Sure, I might have been pretty, but no one ever mentioned it. I liked school, had friends, but I was never remarkable. Not like his stunning, naturally blonde, statuesque girlfriend who held everyone's gaze for most of high school. She knew exactly how to captivate a room. That all changed the summer after I turned 18, right after graduation, on the morning of my birthday, before my parents woke up to begin our tradition of making far too many pancakes and binge-watching movies to recover from the late-night celebrations. I decided to take a walk past the training grounds. Then I caught a scent, something mouth-watering, but also soothing, almost hypnotic. It reminded me of the woods after a fresh rain, even though the sky was clear and had been for days. There, blocking my path, stood Noah, the future alpha. My throat went dry. His dark brown hair clung to his forehead in damp strands, and his matching brown eyes shimmered, flickering to an intense midnight black. Mine, he growled low and possessive. Suddenly, a storm of butterflies erupted inside me. My entire body buzzed, rooted in stunned disbelief. I couldn't believe it. Everything I'd ever dreamed of, every secret fantasy I'd never dared speak aloud, was happening right then. That day, he claimed me, completely and irrevocably. From that moment on, my world orbited him even more than before. It's been over a year now, and I still can't fully grasp that he's mine, only mine. Things aren't perfect. We're both scrambling to master the roles we're about to inherit in just a few months, when he officially steps into his position as alpha at 21. When that happens, I'll stand proudly by his side as his Luna. Still, it sometimes feels unreal. I look at him the same way I did in the cafeteria, filled with longing and desire. The difference now is he meets my gaze with the same intensity. Switch the forks. You know this. Ren, Naomi, the current Luna, and Noah's mother, chided me sharply. My lessons in becoming a Luna mostly involved planning parties, memorizing the names and faces of influential members from other packs, learning to balance warmth with stoicism, and daydreaming about Noah. Honestly, I struggled with everything except the last. All the beige shades looked identical to me. I wasn't even sure there was more than one color of peach. Sorry, Luna, I muttered, catching Naomi's stern glare. No mumbling aloud. Luna, Ren, Jason. No is future Gamma. Entered the room. Claire's here and wants to see you. Wonderful, Naomi said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. My stomach sank. Clary, Noah's high school girlfriend. She was supposed to be at college. You can finish the setup, right? Naomi asked me. I nodded, of course. Luna, I smiled, though my heart twisted with curiosity and probably misplaced dread. I'll help, Jason offered, grabbing the tray of silverware from Naomi. Thanks, I whispered as she left the room. This is torture, he joked. I couldn't agree more, I replied. I'd rather have back-to-back training than sit through another Luna lesson. Although I wasn't a regular in training sessions, I sometimes joined in. But after mating with Noah and becoming his future Luna, I was required to stop completely. Ren, someone I want you to meet. Naomi appeared at the door. Moments later, Claire herself strolled in. Her gaze flicked over the place settings before landing on me. Chapter to Jason. Claire's lips curved into a dazzling smile, flashing pearly white teeth. Her naturally blonde hair was perfectly curled, and she stood tall and confident in a sleek red dress that looked better suited for a party than this formal gathering. Black stilettos accentuated her long, golden legs. Nice to see you. It's been too long. Jason returned the smile, glancing between us. How's college? Fine, she waved her manicured hand dismissively. But Costa Valley is so boring. There's hardly anything to do. Costa Valley rang a faint bell, but I couldn't place why. Claire, I don't think you've met Ren formally yet. Noah's mate, Jason said, making the introduction I'd been waiting for from Naomi. Claire's bright smile faltered briefly, replaced by a right-lipped expression as she appraised me. I tucked some wavy black hair behind my ear, forcing myself to hold her gaze and not stare down at the simple white cotton dress I wore. Suddenly, I felt painfully underdressed in my own home. No, we haven't. Claire extended her hand, but didn't move closer. I closed the gap and shook it firmly. It's a pleasure. I forced a polite smile. Noah and I are honored by your visit. I hope you're staying for his birthday. I kept my tone calm, despite the urge to claw at her perfectly lined eyes for reasons I didn't understand. His 21st birthday party was only days away, and I'd poured myself into every detail of its planning. I wanted her to see I was competent, even if I didn't look as stunning in a mini skirt. But what was I really trying to prove? My skills in party planning. Even thinking about it felt dull, of course. She replied smoothly. My stomach twisted into knots. But wasn't that the answer I was hoping for? I look forward to getting to know you better. I held my ground, smiling steadily. Likewise, her smile was cold, devoid of warmth. Ren, is it? I nodded. I think your soup and dessert spoons are swapped, Claire remarked, eyes flicking to the table. So they are, Naomi tutted, stepping in. Thanks for pointing that out, Claire. She ushered Claire out, their heads close together as they whispered and laughed. I sank into a chair, groaning, very un-Luna of you, Jason teased. But your act was impressive. I glared at him. Was it that obvious? Yeah. He shrugged and rubbed the back of his neck, the telltale sign of trying to soften the blow. Jason and Isaac, the future beta, had become my friends over the past year. But I developed a particular fondness for Jason almost immediately. I was surprised at how accepting they were. I wasn't like the usual girls they hung out with. But in the last year, as future packing leaders, we'd done almost everything together. Living in the pack house, I moved in the night after Noah marked and mated me. The memory still sent shivers of pleasure down my spine. I was overwhelmed with disbelief that the man I dreamed of most of my life was finally claiming me, exploring my body with his tongue and hands. Then, Ren, Jason's voice pulled me from my reverie. HM, I asked if you wanted anything else after we swapped the spoons. I shook my head and bit my lips, holding back questions about Claire. Thinking about her made my stomach drop. A sharp pain like my lungs had been emptied of air and filled with lead. I knew my jealousy was irrational. Their relationship had ended long before I found out I was Noah's mate. I didn't steal him from her. Even if I did, I was his mate now. She was just an ex. Are you okay? Jason's expression was filled with concern. Yeah, of course. I tried to breathe through the ache. Don't worry about Claire. She acts like that around new people. Sure. I tried to dismiss it. I'm going to find Noah. I pushed myself up despite the jealousy simmering inside me. I hurried through the hall, hoping to catch my mate in his father's office, Alpha Harvey's office, before he dashed off to his next commitment. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind. Between his birthday and our impending takeover of the pack leadership, we barely saw each other. I knew seeing him, feeling his touch, would ease this firestorm inside me, this frantic, heated sensation that flooded my body like glowing embers. I'd felt it before. Not jealousy, but stress when Noah was away. I guess it was normal for mates to react so viscerally to each other's absence. Then I remembered where I'd heard of Costa Valley before. Noah had a conference there a month ago, in a park I couldn't recall the name of. Or maybe he hadn't told me. I really needed to get better at remembering all these details. I rounded the corner toward the heavy, dark wooden door of his father's office, soon to be his. Suddenly, I heard noises from behind it, a thumping sound, a growl, a sharp moan, and muffled voices, as if stifled. I blushed, startled. Alpha Harvey and Luna Naomi weren't overly affectionate in public, but they were destined mates. It was natural. I quietly turned away, wanting to give them privacy. Noah, Noah, the soft moan came again, replaced by heavy, muffled panting. I froze, every nerve ending alive with electricity. A cold sweat coated my skin as dread settled in my gut. I must have misheard. I reached out with trembling hands for the doorknob. It was unlocked, which made my stomach twist. Did I really want to see this? I cracked the door open just enough to confirm nothing was amiss. But Noah stood there, his back to me. I knew every contour of his body, how his muscles flexed and tensed when he was deep inside me. Long, golden legs still wrapped around his waist, black stilettos dangling from them. Fuck. He grunted, a clear sign he was closed. He was moments away from finishing with Claire. Chapter 3, I was utterly lost on what to do next. Every instinct screamed at me to run away and shout until my voice broke. Yet my body refused to obey. Would confronting them in that very moment be better, or only make everything worse? I longed to hear him justify how he could betray me like this. I wanted him to feel the weight of guilt, hoping it might dull my burning anger. I needed him to experience regret so that the sharp sting of betrayal might lessen. An explanation was all I craved, to somehow wash away the shock and the aching pain consuming me. Before I could even gather my thoughts, he turned around, pulling his pants up, and saw me standing there. They both did. He froze in place, calling out my name, while she simply offered me a lazy, smug smile. And then I ran. Ren, damn it, Ren. He chased me as I slammed the bedroom door shut, diving beneath the covers, desperate to hide. Ren, he threw the door wide open just as tears streamed down my face. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't begin to process what I was feeling. All I could do was feel, and every emotion I had was wrong, twisted, unbearable. The mattress shifted as he sat beside me, his hand resting gently on my back. He stammered. I don't know what to say. I waited, aching for him to continue. As much as I wanted to scream and rage, part of me desperately wanted him to beg for my forgiveness. I needed his words, some kind of explanation to make this nightmare okay. After a few silent moments, the warm weight of his hand slipped away. I'll talk to you when you calm down, he sighed, and I felt the bed move as he got up. Was he really going to leave me? The creak of the door opening and closing answered that question for me. The hollow emptiness inside my chest tore even wider, making it impossible to breathe. But he never returned. I don't know when sleep claimed me, but when I awoke, he was lying beside me in bed. Relief washed over me in a sudden rush, though I wasn't sure why. I curled into the broad warmth of his back, letting the steady heat of his body lull me back toward the abyss I had fallen into. He rose before I did, the dull ache in my chest threatening to split me apart again. But he had come back for me. I slipped into the shower, running a brush through my tangled hair. My pale green eyes looked unusually bright, stark against the red rims from crying. I grimaced at my reflection. There was no hiding the devastation I'd endured all day and night. Following the faint murmurs of voices, I paused at the breakfast room door, and my stomach dropped. I hurried past the open doorway, praying no one would notice me. Ren, honey, the voice stopped me dead in my tracks as I clenched and unclenched my fists. I lingered just inside the frame, unwilling to sit with that bitch. Luna, Naomi, and Claire appeared completely at ease, sharing a relaxed breakfast together. It was just the two of them. I'm sorry, I can't join you. I forced a smile, hoping it passed as genuine. I have. Oh, your appointment. Yes. Luna Natalia replied warmly. I actually had forgotten about that doctor's visit. I nodded and turned without glancing at Claire. I knew looking at her would unleash a tidal wave of rage. How dare she sit here in my home after what she did with my mate? My mind was consumed by fury as I made my way to the packing clinic. Suddenly, two strong hands wrapped around me. momentarily stunning me before his familiar sense surrounded me. "Come here." He pulled me into an empty room and locked the door behind us. I couldn't stop trembling. Hot tears welled up in my eyes. "Why?" I demanded before he could speak. I shook my head, letting tears pour freely down my face, deliberately refusing to wipe them away. I wanted him to see the damage he had done. He said, nervously rubbing the back of his neck. He was usually quick with words, but now he seemed lost. "It shouldn't have happened like that. It shouldn't have. I'm so sorry. You don't deserve any of this." His deep chocolate eyes pinned me where I stood. Despite myself, my stomach flipped. "I want her gone," I insisted. Chapter 4. Ren. He breathed. "I can't." "You can. She can come to your party, but she's not allowed to stay here." I summoned the lunatone I had been practicing, a voice of authority and steel. I assumed that was why she was here this morning, staying in a guest room at the packing house. "Okay." He lowered his head, then leaned down to press his mouth to mine. His lips barely brushed against mine, and my breath caught, a surge of desire rushing through me. His kiss was restrained but hungry, and he drew me closer. I was engulfed by the spark and warmth of our mate bond. In his arms, I felt loose and free. I couldn't remember the last time he kissed me like this outside of our intimate moments, if it had ever happened at all. He pulled away, and I raised a hand to my swollen lips, dizzy from the effect he still had on me. "What now?" I whispered. He ran a hand through his dark hair. "I'm sorry. I don't even know. With everything happening, I don't feel like myself." Not exactly an explanation, but I wanted to believe him. "Ren, are you still coming to your appointment?" The doctor's voice came through our mind link. "I have to go." I paused, studying him. "To an appointment. We can talk later." He nodded, tucking a stray lock of hair behind my ear, and I melted under his touch. "I'm sorry. That wasn't fair to you," he murmured. I nodded, fighting back tears that once again sprang to my eyes. "I forgive you." The words felt strange as they left my lips. I wasn't sure he even deserved forgiveness yet. I wanted more groveling from him, but more than that, I didn't want to lose him. My lifelong love, the mate destined to be mine. This was just a mistake we would overcome. It would make us stronger, intensifying our love. I could endure the pain. There was no other choice. Well, Luna, the middle-aged doctor who always seemed bubbly and full of life, sat across from me at her desk. Ren, sorry," she corrected herself with a smile. I liked the title. It filled me with pride. To serve and protect the pack I loved. The one I grew up in alongside the man I had always loved, but never thought I could have. The title felt like a bond I hadn't realized I needed. Until yesterday. "It's okay, Dr. Lily," I said, smiling. "I'll have to get used to it soon." Very soon. Her eyes sparkled as she flipped through my charts. They widened slightly, then the smile returned. "Very soon. You'll be called something else." My brow furrowed. "What?" "Congratulations, Luna. You're going to be a mother." I froze in place, letting the words sink in. Looking down at my stomach, I laughed, a laugh of disbelief and joy. We wanted this. I wanted this. And now it was happening. A baby. We were going to have a baby. I rubbed my stomach gently. There was a life growing inside me. Tears pricked my eyes, but now for a different reason. "Really?" I whispered. "Yes." The doctor's smile grew. "Just a few weeks along. I'd say about 5 or 6 weeks. That's why it didn't show last time you were here. It must have happened just days ago. I want you to come back next week so we can do a proper scan. Maybe with Noah." "Okay." I nodded, unable to stop smiling even though my cheeks ached. "Thank you." Joy flooded through me. Everything felt right again. Better than right. Perfect. After leaving the clinic, I clutched the papers confirming my pregnancy close to my heart. I wanted nothing more than to tell him. It would be the perfect birthday present. Though his birthday was tomorrow, the party was tonight. I figured it was close enough. When I walked into the pack house, the atmosphere was completely different than when I left. The air was charged with energy, and people bustled about. Omegas darted around with vases and platters of food, careful not to drop a single thing. I didn't understand. Everything had been set weeks ago. Decisions had already been made. Luna Naomi nearly collided with me. Or maybe I almost bumped into her. Oh, her eyes widened as she saw me. I shoved the papers into my pocket. We've had a change. I'm glad you're here. Her words caught me off guard. She seemed genuinely pleased to take charge herself. Saying it took her far less time than when I was involved. What can I do? I asked with a genuine smile. I was happy she needed me. I told the Omegas to redo the table settings in the dining hall. They're cleaning it again now, but I need you to supervise them. Make sure they're doing it perfectly. She handed me a clipboard and tapped the attached color swatches. We're changing everything. I looked down at the swatches. They were completely different from what we'd finalized weeks ago. Yes, the prince is coming. She waved her hand dismissively. I fought back a laugh. A prince? What do you mean? Have you not been paying attention in your studies, Renia? Her brown eyes locked on mine. I flinched inwardly at the use of my full name. I have. And the royal family stopped holding power a century ago. I countered. She sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose like I was giving her a headache. They don't hold power really, yes, but he is the leader of our territory. He represents us. They are still powerful, naturally, and we respect them and their bloodline, she explained. Alpha Darius, the prince, has told us he'll attend this evening. I've met him once, of course. He's invited to all our packing events, but usually he declines or sends a representative. I nodded, but still didn't understand. If he didn't truly have power over us, why all the fuss? And, oh God, the fancy china I definitely shattered last time. If you have any questions, link me. This has to be perfect. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. I sighed, reviewing all the changes. At least I wouldn't have to set out the silverware, just oversee the process. This would help keep my mind off the memory of Claire's toned legs wrapped around my mate. Anger flared again. That was in the past, the recent past, but still past. I would focus on the future. I patted my pocket, feeling the confirmation from the doctor. The future and this baby were all that mattered now. The afternoon dragged on, but was over before I knew it. Dusk settled beyond the tall dining room windows, and I yawned, silently cursing myself for not asking if I was allowed coffee. I'd seen it a lot in movies, but I wasn't sure how it affected us wolves. Ren, what are you still doing here? Luna Natalia slipped inside, her hair and makeup perfect for the evening. Though she hadn't changed yet, I was just finishing up. We only have a few more centerpieces for the smaller tables. I'll handle that. Go get ready. It's about to start. She grabbed the clipboard from my hand, and I let her. If I left before it was done, I knew I'd get in trouble. No matter what I did. It was always wrong, and I'd come to accept that. I would be Luna in a few months, and I hoped the hold she had on me would lessen. Significantly, I hoped. Chapter 5. After a quick shower, I stepped into the sleek silver gown that clung to my curves like it was tailored just for me. The color, Noah's favorite, had been a point of debate in my mind all afternoon. I'd kept a few other dresses from the collection Luna Naomi had sent over for this occasion, but ultimately, I wanted to be seen tonight. The gown featured delicate straps and a plunging back, leaving me exposed in ways I wasn't entirely comfortable with. I wasn't sure if I was dressing for the woman I was, or the one I was trying to become. A soft knock echoed against the door, and my heart jumped as I reached for the sleek black gift box resting on the vanity, the one holding the pregnancy test results. "Can I come in?" asked a voice I knew even better than Noah's. I opened the door to find my mother standing there. "Oh, Ren," she breathed, her eyes sweeping over me. "You look breathtaking. Come on in." I stepped aside with a smile. "I figured you might need a hand. with Leah out of town and all. She gestured toward the vanity, and I nodded, settling into the chair. Leah had been my closest confidant since middle school, the kind of best friend who felt more like a sister. Every summer, her family took an extended vacation, and though I missed her tonight more than I cared to admit, I understood how much those trips meant to her. She'd been back in a few weeks, and I'd had plenty to tell her when she returned. I glanced down at my stomach, unable to keep from smiling. But Noah would be the first to know, even before Mom. The urge to shout it from the rooftops was suffocating. "Thanks," I murmured as my mom began curling sections of my hair. I stayed as still as I could, trying to steady my hands while I lined my eyes and dabbed on shimmering eyeshadows that matched the silver of my dress. I wasn't half as good at it as Leah, but tonight wasn't about perfection. It was about Noah. And I doubted anyone would even glance at my makeup once they saw the way I looked for him. "There we go," she said, brushing out the curls until they settled in soft waves. My hair had a bit of a natural bend to it, but her touch gave it elegance. "One last thing." She opened a velvet box she'd brought with her. "I know tonight is about Noah, but you're on the verge of becoming Luna. Your father and we couldn't be prouder." She took out a delicate white gold hair comb, sparkling with tiny diamonds and deep blue sapphires. "Grandma's?" I asked, reaching out to touch it, my hand pausing midair. She nodded. "And now it's yours." I watched in the mirror as she pinned back a section of my curls, tucking the heirloom into place. "You're absolutely radiant," she whispered. "Thank you," I said, leaning into the warmth of her affection. "Now, let's not be late." "The maid of the guest of honor can't exactly arrive after things have started," she teased, slipping seamlessly into her Luna voice. I grabbed a sheer shawl from the closet and draped it over my bare arms and back. It made the dress feel a bit more modest, a bit more like me. "I'll see you in there," she said, heading off toward the grand dining hall. I, on the other hand, made my way to meet Noah and his parents in his father's office. "You're stunning," Noah said as he curled my hand around his arm, but maybe showing a bit too much skin for a Luna to be. It wasn't a compliment, not really. More like a reprimand, dressed up in a whisper. I thought I trailed off, not even sure what I thought. That I looked the part, that he'd appreciate me putting in the effort for him. I felt foolish now. "There's a fine line between classy and slutty," he murmured, brushing his lips against my ear. I shivered from the contact, doing my best to drown the sting of his words in the warmth of his touch. Together, we entered the dining hall, flanked by his parents. The room stood to greet the future alpha with a round of applause, despite everything. I felt a surge of pride walking in beside him. We glided between the tables until we reached the long table reserved for ranked members and honored guests. I moved to sit at his right, like I always had. "Shift over one," he whispered. "What?" My seat had never changed. "The prince is joining us," he said coolly, pulling the chair out so I could move. I stood, sliding into the next seat without protest. I reached for a flute of champagne out of habit, but stopped short. I wasn't drinking tonight, not with our baby growing inside me. The speeches began, but the seats between us remained empty. He didn't motion for me to return, didn't offer a smile or a glance. I drifted into my thoughts, only snapping out of it when Lunane Omi gave me a pointed look and whispered my name. "Right." I stood just as the prince took the chair between us. He glanced my way, and I nodded politely before looking past him to Noah. That's when Claire entered. The man beside me may have said something, but I didn't hear a word. My entire focus narrowed on Claire as she strode toward the table. Her body hugged tight in a strapless black dress that flared dramatically with each step. Her lips were painted in a bold, blood-red hue, and her confidence was a spectacle all on its own. She greeted the man next to me with a sugary smile before directing a gleaming grin my way. Her bright teeth, fake and far too perfect. I returned a smirk disguised as a smile, thinking of what was hidden inside the little black box. That news would strip the grin off her face in an instant. The future Luna looks exquisite, the man said, nodding after Claire. She's not the future Luna, I said, my voice tight as I clenched my fork. Oh, I didn't mean. I am, I snapped, fixing him with a glare. His pale blue eyes blinked in surprise, then softened as he looked at me more carefully. I meant no offense. I didn't respond. My attention was glued to Claire as she leaned across the table and whispered something in Noah's ear. His eyes widened briefly before a slow smile crept across his lips. He knew exactly how this would look, how it would make me feel. My hand twitched toward the mind link, ready to confront him, when the man beside me broke the silence. I've always hated events like these. Too formal, too fake. What would you prefer instead? I asked, eyes still locked on Noah. Something small, something real. Just the people who actually matter. I nodded slowly. Now that sounds like heaven, but not exactly on brand for ranked members and their obsession with appearances. The Lunas would probably collapse from sheer boredom. He let out a laugh, a real one, loud and warm. It drew Noah's attention, along with his parents. I smiled at them like nothing was wrong. Claire finally stopped parading at the head of the table, only to loop around and settle in beside Noah. People literally shifted their seats so he could make room for her. Anger surged through me like a wave crashing against the shore. The audacity of it, of her, of him. What the hell was he thinking? Maybe he was just being polite, maybe. But this crossed the line. The man next to me eventually excused himself, offering polite apologies to Noah and his parents. Most of the other guests filtered out soon after, leaving behind only the ranked members and a few stragglers, my parents among them. Claire leaned in close to Noah, smiling at him like they shared some inside jokes. Every fiber of me wanted to slap that smile off her face, but instead, I handed him the gift. I wanted to give this to you earlier, but I trailed off with a shrug, biting my lips. He took the box, curiosity flickering across his face as he opened it and pulled out the slip of paper. My stomach twisted with nerves and joy, butterflies swarming as I waited for his reaction. This was something we'd both longed for. And now, here it was, proof of a baby. The moon goddess herself had timed it perfectly, a child to carry on the Alpha line, arriving just months before our official ascension. Ren, his voice caught, and for a second, I saw emotion flash in his eyes, something like hurt, before his face hardened. I wish you'd told me in private, he said, jaw clenched. The excitement in my chest began to crumble. What did it matter if no one else knew yet? He hadn't even made an announcement. Then he stood. I, Noah Henderson, future alpha of the Azure Hollow Pack, reject you, Rainia Barnes, as my mate and future Luna. I didn't understand the words, but my body did. Pain burst through me like a wildfire, our bonds tearing apart at the seams. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. It was as if my blood had been replaced with fire. This wasn't heartbreak. This was death. My vision dimmed as darkness swallowed everything whole. Chapter 7 shouts rang out, sharp and frantic, but they seemed far away. Then I felt hands, familiar, warm, strong, lifting me from the floor. My eyelids fluttered open, just enough to see Claire kneeling beside Noah, her arms wrapped around him, trying to console him as he fell apart. Then the darkness swallowed me again, not peaceful, but laced with agony. The pain didn't go away entirely, but it dulled just enough for my mind to start working again, flickering through fear and fragmented thoughts. One question stabbed through everything. Was the baby still alive? Terror flooded me, worse than any physical pain. After everything else I'd lost, I couldn't lose this baby too. They were my last tie to Noah, my last thread connecting me to the life I still desperately longed for. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying in my childhood bedroom. The familiar ceiling stared back at me. The realization hit hard. I wasn't in the room I shared with Noah at the pack house. I was here, home, but not where I belonged anymore. I'd hoped this was all a nightmare, but this made it feel sickeningly real. Tears sprang up before I could stop them. My mom walked in carrying a glass of water and helped me sit upright. "Sweetheart," she said gently. My throat burned. I gulped down the water in one go, desperate to ease the dryness and push down the emotions threatening to rise again. "How long have I been out?" My voice cracked and rasped. "Almost 2 full days." The first thing that struck me was that I'd missed Noah's birthday. And I hated that my first thought was still about him, not myself. But that was always the way it was, even before he noticed me. I loved him first, hardest, completely. He wants to talk to you," my mom said softly. "When you're ready." I nodded. Just hearing that he still wanted to talk lit a flicker of hope in me, pathetic as it was. Maybe he had come to his senses. That fragile sliver of hope was enough to get me out of bed and into the shower. I stood under the spray longer than I should have, scrubbing my skin as if I could wash off the pain. I dragged a comb through my hair, though it did nothing for the swelling beneath my red, puffy eyes. Good, let him see what he did to me. I marched to his office, the one he was borrowing from his father, and knocked once before pushing the door open without waiting for a reply. Noah looked up from behind the desk, startled. He looked awful. Not awful enough, but at least worse than usual. That satisfied something cruel in me. "Ren," he said quietly, motioning for me to sit. I stayed standing. His expression was unreadable. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold and dark. Not the warm, brown gaze I was used to. I locked my knees and raised my chin. I didn't say a word. This wasn't mine to fix. I shouldn't have done it that way. He started. I was under pressure. But that's not how it should have gone. You didn't deserve that. I should have waited until after the party. I should have spoken to you in private. He ran a hand down his face, weariness dragging at his features. I panicked, but now that the situation's calmed a bit, he met my eyes, expression hard. "I need you to finish it." I frowned, unsure what he meant. "I need you to accept the rejection. Ren," he said, voice flat. "We both need to move on." The words knocked the breath clean out of me. I gripped the back of the chair to keep from falling. "You can stay with the pack," he added quickly. Like that helped. "Your belongings are being packed and will be sent to your parents' house." To make the transition easier, I barely heard him. Blood roared in my ears. Everything felt distant. His voice, the office, the entire fucking world. "Ren?" he asked. But it sounded like he was speaking through water. My mouth moved without my brain fully catching up. "Renia Barnes. Accept your rejection as your mate and the future Luna of the Azure Hollow Pack." The last piece of me shattered. Somehow, I made it out of that room without begging, without collapsing, without demanding answers to the million questions screaming inside me. What about our children? Why are you doing this? Why now? I didn't register the people I passed as I broke into a run, legs moving on instinct. Running wasn't something a Luna did, too unseemly, too wild. But I wasn't a Luna anymore, so fuck it. I stormed through the clinic doors, ignoring the nurse's protest, and burst into Dr. Lily's office. "Is the baby okay?" My voice was a rasping demand. "I need to know that now." Chapter 8. Her expression softened the moment she saw me. She already knew. The baby was fine. I, on the other hand, was absolutely not. But at least there was that. No one else was home when I returned. I crawled into the bed I'd slept in before Noah ever claimed me as his mate. It felt too small now. Too innocent. Months ago, I'd been preparing to become Luna. Now I was back where I started, only more broken, more confused, more alone. I don't know how much time passed. Hours, days. It blurred together until my mom finally managed to coax me from the void I'd curled into. "Sweetie," she said gently, her voice thick with worry, "I know this is impossible. Your father and I can't even imagine the pain you're in. But we need to talk." She placed a tray in front of me, soup and thick. crusty slices of homemade bread. I ate only because of the baby. My own hunger had died days ago. If not for them, I think I would have simply stopped eating. Let myself fade out entirely. We just want to know what you want to do, she said softly. Whatever it is, we'll support you. We're behind you. My dad entered the room and rested a hand on her shoulder. She sat beside me on the bed, worried etched into every line on her face. What do you mean? My voice was still hoarse, and I didn't even remember why. Well, do you want to stay here? My mom offered. Or maybe take some time in the city? A human city. Or we could find a temporary pack for you to transfer to. Your aunt would be thrilled to have you stay with her. My hand drifted to my stomach, flat still, but alive with meaning. I can't, I said, my voice cracking. Part of me ached to vanish, to go to my aunt's lakeside cottage, or to that tiny dorm room I once imagined myself in, living a quiet college life. But that wasn't possible anymore. I carried the truth of everything that had happened inside me. There was no pretending otherwise. I bit my lip, hard. A large part of me wanted to stay. No, that was a lie. Most of me needed to stay. I wanted them all to see. I wanted the entire fucking pack to witness the truth swelling beneath my skin. I wanted Noah to see it. To wake up every damn day with a hollow ache in his chest, knowing what he'd thrown away. I wanted to fight. I'm staying, I said, nodding. The decision gave me strength I hadn't felt in days. I'm going to stay. And I'm going to fight for this baby. They deserve to have a father. I'll make him see that, even if it scares the shit out of him. My parents exchanged a glance. My mom looked like she was about to cry. Sweetheart, she said gently, placing a hand on my knee. We love how strong you are. But maybe staying here isn't the best option. What's going on? I asked, heart beginning to race. My mom hesitated, and my dad ran a hand through his mustache. A nervous tic I knew all too well. Reno, she began, eyes lowered. Just tell me. I clenched the spoon so tightly I was surprised it didn't snap. It's just that we heard something, she said carefully. And it might be just a rumor. You know how people talks, Noah's planning to take another Luna. My dad cut in. The words dropped like a bomb. The world tilted. I rushed to the bathroom, stomach lurching. The little food I'd managed to force down came up violently. I wanted to go back to that nothingness I'd felt when he rejected me. The numbness had been a kindness. Now it was unraveling, jagged at the edges, and everything hurt again. My mom was there, wiping my face with a cold cloth, helping me back to bed. The looks on both of their faces, that was the part that finally broke me. The next day, Luna Natalia arrived at our door. I hadn't expected to see her, but I was too numb to care. Still, I was curious. Maybe she came to apologize for the walking disaster she raised. Maybe she wanted to beg my forgiveness on behalf of her son. At the very least, I hoped she had the decency to acknowledge that he was a goddamn monster. Chapter 9. I threw on some clothes and twisted my long hair into a messy bun, not even bothering to untangle it. I was far too exhausted to care how I looked. Sliding down beside her on the couch, I tried to keep myself steady as my mom quietly brought in tea before stepping out of the room. I picked up the cup, more for the distraction than the drink. Ren, she said gently. Her brow furrowed, eyes filled with pity. That look made my skin crawl. I wasn't expecting any of this. None of us were, she went on. I just wanted to tell you how sorry Harvey and I are that it turned out this way. We had really hoped to see you become our Luna. You've always been a joy to have around. I hated the way she spoke of me, like I was already gone, like the decision had been made, and locked in, like I was a closed chapter. Whether or not I believed her wasn't the point. Hearing that they'd enjoyed my presence felt nice. I nodded silently, staring into the amber tea, hoping it would steady me. But we are relieved he made the right choice. That sentence made my head snap up. My eyes locking on hers. Eyes that matched her son's too well. What the hell did she mean? I know it doesn't feel that way to you right now, she said, letting out a soft sigh. and taking a slow sip. But the future of this pack matters, especially the alpha bloodline. This situation is far from perfect, but he's stepping up to create a stable home for his children. My heartbeat stalled, my breath caught. Had Noah told them about the baby, our baby? The way she phrased it was confusing. But then, could it be? Could it mean that he still cared? That even if he hadn't chosen me, he had chosen the baby? That had to count for something. Maybe it was enough. Maybe it had to be. So, I guess I need to start planning a baby shower, she said with a half smile, and help organize a new Luna ceremony too. I pressed a hand to my belly, a tentative smile tugging at my lips. You know, I asked, barely above a whisper. She was already planning a baby shower for us. Noah and Claire just told us the news, she replied softly, that damned pity in her expression again. What? My voice came out sharper than I intended. And just like that, the flicker of hope in my chest snuffed out, cold dread sliding in to take its place. You didn't know, she said quickly, covering her mouth with her hands. Claire's nearly a month along. I didn't think I could be more stunned than I already was. But clearly, I was wrong. We hate how it all happened. Believe me, she added, her voice trembling. But we're so proud of Noah. It took courage to make a decision that painful, to put his child first, even when it meant hurting someone he once loved deeply. I barely heard her anymore. Get out, I said, voice flat and firm. She looked shocked, completely blindsided, but I felt a shred of satisfaction at her reaction. Ren, please. I know you're hurting, but I said I won't repeat myself. I snapped, standing and turning away from her without another glance. I stepped out of the room and sat down on the front steps, curling in on myself. I was beyond crying now. The tears had dried up somewhere along the way. I couldn't stop thinking about how someone who once claimed to love me could do something this cruel. The pain he caused, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Well, maybe I would wish it on Claire. After all, she did this to me. But what had I done to him to deserve this? I'd always feared I wasn't good enough for him. Still, when he claimed me, I let myself believe, just for a little while, that maybe I was worthy. That maybe the moon goddess had truly fated us. But now, no matter what I wore, how I behaved, or even if I carried his children in front of his parents, nothing would make him take me back. He made his decision, and it wasn't me. I told my parents what I'd decided, and they agreed without hesitation. I had to practically hold my dad back when he learned I was pregnant. He looked ready to march off and knock Noah's teeth out. My mom just cried, and her sobs broke something in me all over again. I hated what I was doing to them. I hated that he was putting them through this. This should have been a joyful time, me giving them their first grandchild. But he destroyed that too, like he destroyed everything else. They didn't want to leave the pack. Not really, but I knew they'd do anything for me, so we left. I wrote a letter to Leah and had someone slip it into her mailbox. Then we packed what we could and walked away from our home. My parents hoped to return someday, but I knew I never would. He humiliated me in front of everyone. He chose another woman to be Luna. He didn't just cheat once. He kept doing it. And he got her pregnant. And worst of all, I still loved him. I hated myself for that. I didn't even get the dignity of choosing to leave him. I didn't walk away from his betrayal. I was tossed aside and shamed like I meant nothing. It wasn't just him. It was the people who stood by and did nothing. The Beta and Gamma, his best friends, who used to be mine too, didn't say a word. His parents let it happen. Not one damn person tried to stop it. It wasn't just his rejection that tore me apart. It was the fact that no one, not even once, looked at him and said, "What the actual fuck are you doing?" Rage bubbled up inside me, swallowing the sadness whole. As we drove away from the only home I'd ever known, the place I was once meant to rule, my heart burned with grief and fury. Chapter 10 Alpha Darius, there was something about her that unsettled me, and I couldn't make sense of it. I'd been sure, at first, that she was my mate. That's how it had felt the first time our eyes met. But then again, it wasn't quite what I'd imagined a mating bond would be. Still, it was stronger than anything I'd ever experienced with another woman, no question. Her beauty was obvious. The raven black hair cascading over one shoulder. The vivid green eyes that had locked onto mine just for a second. But that wasn't what gripped me. It was how the air seemed to shift when she looked at me. Like the entire room tilted just slightly. The strange part was that she didn't seem the least bit affected. Most people, wolves, humans, didn't matter, were overwhelmed when I pulled back my alpha aura. She acted like she didn't even see me. No matter how many openings I gave her, she glanced right past me, uninterested. And unlike the dozens of women I'd met, many of whom threw themselves at me, mate or not, she kept her distance. I wasn't arrogant, just honest. I knew what I brought to the table. Still, I kept watching her. The way she chewed on her lower lip. The way her brows pinched together when she frowned. How could she not feel it? When she told me she was next in line to be Luna, I actually thought she was kidding. She wasn't the typical Luna candidate. Not like the radiant blonde glued to the future Alpha's side. What was his name again? Norman, Noah, Napoleon. Didn't matter. Even though it was his birthday and I was technically the guest of honor. She should have been seated beside him. I didn't want to leave that night. I wanted another chance to talk to her. But duty called. A meeting with a rogue pack I'd been chasing down for weeks. I never wanted to attend that party in the first place. It was beneath me. A birthday for the heir of a mid-tier pack. The only reason I went was because something pulled me there. Her. Not that it mattered. She belonged to someone else. But I couldn't shake her. She haunted me. So I accepted the invitation to her Luna ceremony. I had to see her again. Just once. I told myself it was to put this obsession to rest. To prove it was nothing. Probably the whiskey playing tricks on me that night. I needed closure. That's all. As my car rolled towards Azure Hollow's gates, she filled every thought I had. Her lips, her hair in my hands. The way her smile never seemed quite real. The way her gaze pierced through everything. What the hell was I doing? She was someone else's mate. She wore his damn mark. She was about to become Luna. I hated the way that thought made something vicious coil in my gut. I wasn't used to jealousy. I didn't like it. Alpha Harvey, Luna Naomi. I greeted formally, inclining my head to the current leaders, even though they'd be stepping down any minute now. Alpha Darius, they said in unison, bowing slightly. We're honored to have you here. Naomi beamed, clinging to her mate's arm. Sorry, I had to leave early last time. Urgent matter. Of course, Harvey nodded. We're just grateful you came back. I know my son would love to talk with you after the ceremony about possible alliances. I'll see if I can squeeze it in. Excellent, he said, forcing a polite smile. I didn't care that he saw right through me. He wasn't wrong. I was brushing them off. I nodded again and moved on. I wanted this over with. Best case, this whole thing had been a passing glitch. But I knew better. What I felt wasn't going to fade, it would only grow stronger. The ceremony was exactly what I expected. Long, formal, and dull as hell. Noah, yeah, that was his name, walked onto the stage next to his father. And then they called for his Luna. My eyes locked on the far end of the stage, waiting for her to appear. My entire body tensed. I didn't know what I felt. Hope? Dread? I braced myself, waiting for that flash of black hair, for those green eyes to glance my way. I held my breath. God, I shouldn't have come. Chapter 1-1. I wasn't sure whether what I felt was relief or just plain confusion. When the statuesque blonde I'd mistaken for the future Luna at my last visit stepped onto the stage. Her figure was unmistakably pregnant. Her hands rested delicately on the curve of her belly, framed by the flowing white gown that brushed the floor. I didn't bother registering anything else about her. She meant absolutely nothing to me. But then the questions started bubbling back up. Ren, yes, that was her name. I made sure to learn it as soon as I left last time. Had claimed she was the one meant to be Luna. At that birthday celebration, she hadn't sat beside Noah, but her gaze lingered on him more than once. Something between them had definitely been there. Had she lied to me, or maybe misunderstood her own place? Could she have been involved with that new alpha and simply got left behind? When he discovered his true mate, I'd seen that kind of drama unfold before. Hell, it happened more often than people like to admit. Still, none of it added up. Then again, I barely knew the girl. Claire has been by Noah's side longer than anyone else, Luna Naomi said with a bright smile, addressing the blonde and her son with pride. They may not be fated, but they are mates all the same. What the hell? We are honored and overjoyed to welcome Claire as the next Luna. It's a blessing to have her. And the air she carries. Continue the Henderson legacy, she added, her voice catching as tears welled in her eyes. These ceremonies always got ridiculously sentimental. I never understood why. Son. Alpha Harvey reached over to clasp Noah's hand in a firm shake. I tuned out the rest of the fanfare. I'd been through too many of these events to care much about the speeches. My eyes stayed locked on Noah and Claire. She never stopped caressing her baby bump, as if trying to remind the entire room of her pregnancy every 10 seconds. Everyone already knew, and at this point, it just felt like a performance. They looked happy, or at least like a couple basking in infatuation. But it was unusual to see such a young alpha take a chosen mate. I had stepped into my role at 19, 5 years ago, and had yet to find my mate. And sure, the day I did, she would make me stronger, make my pack stronger. But until then, I didn't need anyone. I had my beta and gamma, and they had never failed me. But then she showed up. I couldn't understand why Noah hadn't just waited for his fated partner. What was the rush? And more importantly, where did Ren fit into all this? Or where did she think she fit? The ceremony dragged on longer than necessary, filled with endless, self-important speeches. Honestly, some of these people just loved hearing themselves talk. Eventually, it wrapped up. Finally, I could move around. I never cared for the word mingle. People rarely did that with me anyway. Most kept their distance, staring, sure, but always from afar. It wasn't just the dominance I exuded. Even when I kept my aura in check, it was the title. A prince walking among them. Yeah, that turned heads. Normally, I didn't mind the isolation. It kept the useless noise at bay unless someone wanted something. Or I did. Alpha Noah, congratulations. I extended my hand. His grip was pathetically weak. Prince Alpha Darius, he replied, using the wrong form of my title. Idiot. I pulled my hand away without a word. Where's Ren? I asked. Not interested in small talk or subtlety, especially when it came to her. His brows drew together as he stepped back a little. Oh, recognition dawned in his eyes. You were at my birthday. I gave him a single nod. Funny that he'd nearly forgotten something like that, unless he was pretending. He swallowed hard. I always found it best to let people talk first around me. The silence made them nervous, desperate to fill the space. They usually told me more than they intended. You didn't hear? He asked, giving me another quick glance. Clearly not, or I wouldn't be asking. I replied, expression flat. Voice tinged with boredom I didn't need to fake. Well, of we wouldn't separate our ways. His hands fidgeted. Never a good look for a newly crowned alpha. What does that mean? Don't play games with me, I said sharply. His shoulders slumped just slightly, and though I kept my face composed, I felt a small thrill at his discomfort. I always kept my emotions tightly in check, habitual, effortless. We rejected each other. He admitted finally. That stopped me. Ren and Noah had been fated mates, and they'd mutually rejected the bond? That was rare, practically unheard of. I'd never met anyone who had actually gone through with something like that, but thinking about it, I could see why she would. He wasn't exactly lacking in looks, but there was something dull about him, passive. Hardly the alpha presence one would expect. Ren, on the other hand, she was extraordinary, stunning, yes, but it was more than that. She had an awareness about her, a poise, a kind of quiet sharpness I hadn't seen often. I was going off limited interaction, only the few brief exchanges we'd had, but even then, I knew one thing clearly. He wasn't worthy of her. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, though the sympathy was all his. "Where is she now? If I could find her, I could put this damn obsession to rest. Or maybe confirm that it wasn't just in my head." "I don't know," he said, glancing over my shoulder at someone approaching. "I'm still speaking to you." I brought his attention back, tone like a lash. "Yes, sir." He dipped his head again. It was almost satisfying. "She left a few months ago, but I don't know where she went." She left. That didn't sit well. Sure, it would be tough to stick around after a rejection, especially one involving the alpha. But if it really had been mutual, why would she feel the need to disappear? "Who does know where she went?" I asked, my voice low and steely. Actually, no one. She left with her parents," he said, squirming beneath my stare, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a kid caught lying. And then his leggy blonde sidled up beside him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Oops. Don't want to bump you with the belly." She grinned up at him, one hand affectionately circling her stomach. "Wouldn't be good for the baby." "It would be a tragedy," I replied flatly and turned on my heels. That brief interaction drained me more than the entire ceremony. And now I had even more questions than before. If they had truly severed their bond months ago, how the hell had he moved on so easily? The pain from breaking a fated connection was supposed to be brutal. Yet here he was, already lunabound to someone else. Already knocked her up that it didn't add up. But honestly, I didn't give a damn about them. Not really. I had no interest in their drama or their choices. The only person I gave a damn about in this whole godforsaken pack was Ren Barnes, and apparently, she was long gone. Chapter 12 Ren. I pushed the windows open, welcoming the first hints of warmer weather. The breeze still clung to traces of winter, as if the season refused to release its grip, even though spring was already slipping away. The air felt clean and crisp, whisking the lingering warmth from inside the cottage. The scent of fresh bread, my mom's morning ritual, wafted out, mingling with the cool air and sunshine. I stood there for a moment, letting it all settle into me. The smell of my mom's baking, the breeze stirring the curtains, the way the light spilled into our little home. I knew Everett was outside with my dad, playing just beyond where I could see them. For a heartbeat, or maybe a few, I let myself pretend everything was okay. No, not pretending. I let myself believe it was perfect. These moments were rare, brief as a breath, but I clung to them, storing them away like precious keepsakes. At night, when I lay beside my son, I'd replay those fragments. I'd close my eyes and relive them, those perfect snapshots of peace. It was how I reminded myself that joy could still exist. We hadn't settled too far from the pack, just far enough to be overlooked. Not that anyone was searching, but we had nowhere else to go. Azure Hollow was the only life any of us had ever known, even though my parents seemed happy here, genuinely so. Sometimes I knew they still missed their old home. They would have stayed forever if they'd had the choice, but they didn't. Not after what happened. Not after what I did. What Noah did. This cottage had been in my dad's family for generations. We'd visited occasionally when I was a kid, just for a break. Now, it was permanent. Now, it was all we had. Nestled in a forest clearing several miles outside of Cypress City, the nearest town to my former Packlands, it felt isolated enough to keep the past at bay. For a while, that's all I wanted. Escape. And here, I found it. Raising Everett became my world. I poured everything I had into it. I taught him as much as his nearly 5-year-old mind could absorb. His days were filled with sunshine, nature, and people who loved him deeply. Not a bad way to grow up. Not the life I imagined, but not a bad one. He should have been raised in the pack house, where he belonged as alpha heir. I didn't care about titles, but I worried he might someday feel the absence of what could have been. His other grandparents, his father, a whole legacy. I often wondered what kind of boy he'd become if he'd grown up in the pack he was meant to lead. I carried anger for him, but if I was honest, I carried even more of it for myself. Everyone who once surrounded me, the Omegas who helped plan those ridiculous parties, the packing doctor who confirmed my pregnancy, Alpha Harvey who welcomed me and told Noah our bond would make him stronger, Noah's beta Ivan, his gamma Jason, men I once considered close, so they all abandoned me. Maybe not in action, but in spirit. Their silence was betrayal enough. I knew, logically, they wouldn't have left the pack just because of what happened to me. That wasn't realistic. But knowing they stayed, accepted it, moved on, that broke something inside me. Whether or not they approved of what Noah did, none of them stopped him. None of them protected me. That silence, that inaction, was something I could never forgive. Not that they'd ever ask for forgiveness. Not that they'd ever get the chance. I unclenched my hand, noticing I'd been gripping my palm so tightly my nails had left little crescents. I took a deep breath, willing the storm inside me to pass. Everett was starting to sense it when I fell into that black place, the one made of rage and regret and helplessness. I still don't know if the life I gave him is better or worse than the one that was taken from him. But I know it's different. Wildly, irrevocably different. This is the only life he knows, one filled with love, quiet mornings, and long afternoons with my parents and me. But even this fragile happiness isn't permanent. It can't be. It breaks my heart to imagine the day this innocence will end. When the world of this brutal, unforgiving world unmarks him, I've seen it firsthand. The pain it brings, even when fate or the goddess is supposed to be guiding things. There's no fairness here. The world doesn't need a reason to destroy you. Lately, I've felt it again, that heaviness in the air, like something's coming. I can't say what exactly, but it's there, building. I know my parents would stay here forever if I asked them, but I won't. I can't. They've already given up too much because of me. Mama, Everett called, tugging gently on my sweater. His bright green eyes, so much like mine, looked up at me, innocent and curious. "Did you wash your hands?" I asked, gently peeling his fingers away from my sleeve. Oh, he glanced back toward my dad and then bolted toward the bathroom. "We found a few more things for the treasure box," my dad said, walking up and emptying his pockets. That familiar ache returned, part sadness, part acceptance. That feeling you get when you know something beautiful is winding down, and you're powerless to stop it. "Thanks," I murmured, taking the items. I went to our room and started sorting through them, pressing the leaves and flowers, setting aside anything new to dry and preserve. Every little find went into Everett's treasure box. I wanted him to have something real to remember this place by. That night, we had dinner like we always did. The four of us gathered around our small table. Afterwards, I tucked Everett into bed, kissed his forehead, and turned off the lights. Then I stood in the kitchen, looking at my parents as they cleaned up the last of the dishes. "I think it's time," I said aloud. For the first time, they froze, hands stilling mid-motion. They exchanged a glance, then took their usual seats across from me at the kitchen table, the table that had served every purpose imaginable over the years, from meals and lesson plans to late-night heart-to-hearts. My dad reached for my mom's hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "Sweetheart," he said softly. I inhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the scarred wood between us. "I think it's time for me to move forward, for Everett and me to take the next step. Just the two of us." I didn't have the strength to meet their eyes. They glanced at one another again. Quiet and uncertain. My mom shifted slightly in her chair, waiting for me to continue. They weren't going to interrupt. "I can never fully express how grateful I am for everything you've done. for all the sacrifices you made," I said, my voice breaking before I forced it steady again. "But I know you both miss your life in the pack. You deserve to go back. And Everett, he deserves more than this quiet existence. He needs to be around other kids. We all know he can't grow up completely alone out here." My mom gave a small nod as she dabbed at the corner of her eyes. "Are you absolutely sure?" My dad asked gently. His eyes looked like they were beginning to miss too. "You know we're more than happy to." He stopped himself, the end of the sentence hanging unspoken in the air. "I know," I said quietly, "but I can't keep leaning on you like this. Everett's going to start school soon, and I have to find my own way, something that exists outside all of this." I gestured vaguely around the room, at the cabin, the woods, the safety that had started to feel like a cage. Because no matter how much time had passed, my past still lived inside me like a shadow. Some days, the betrayal felt as raw as it did the moment Noah had stood in front of everyone and denied me. Denied our bond, our son, and the life I dreamed of. After I left, Leah, my best friend, had reached out. I'd written her a long, tear-streaked letter explaining everything. And though I hadn't known if I'd heard from her again, she stayed in touch. We wrote nearly every week. The mail service was terrible out here, but I always tried to call her during trips into town for groceries, or when Everett outgrew another pair of shoes. We rarely stepped inside the city itself, unless it was for something special. Once in a while, my dad would want to catch a baseball game, and my mom and I would take Everett to the park nearby. But I couldn't even remember the last time we'd done that. Life had turned into a loop. Safe, familiar, but stagnant. Leah was the only reason I knew Claire had been officially named Luna. According to the pack's version of events, Noah accepted her as his maid because she was pregnant, and the people actually praised him for it. They viewed him as some tragic hero who gave up his true mate for the goodness of his child. Leah didn't like to talk about it, but I needed to know. Not that it brought closure. It didn't. If anything, it made the betrayal deeper, more bitter. I didn't hate my life. Not really. I loved Everett. I appreciated what my parents had done for me. But none of it erased the weight I carried, the sense of a life stolen. Choices ripped away before I even knew I had them. I forced my thoughts back to the present. "It's time," I said, cutting off the downward spiral before it consumed me. "I want to figure out who I am, beyond being a Luna, beyond being a mom." I stared down at my hands resting in my lap. I'd always done well in school, excelled in most subjects, but I never had a clear plan for what came after. Back then, I assumed I'd stay in the pack, maybe get a job there, maybe go to college if things worked out. Then everything changed when I found out I was mated to the future alpha. My future had been rewritten for me. Just like that. Now, for the first time in years, I had the space to ask myself what I wanted. It still felt unfamiliar, this freedom, almost too big to hold. I wanted something stable for Everett, something that could give us both a future. I needed a career that interested me, gave us financial security, and hopefully made me feel alive again. I wanted Everett to grow up seeing his mom love what she did, not just survive. "All right," my dad said, grounding me again. "What are you thinking?" I gave a small shake of my head, unsure of how to put it into words. "I think I'd like to go into the city, find a job, maybe an apartment. Last time I was in town, I saw a flyer for open enrollment at a community college. I wanted to look into it. I tried to speak with conviction, even though my confidence wavered. "That sounds promising," he said, rubbing at the stubble on his chin. "If that's okay, I want to go by myself. Just me and Everett. Once we're settled, then you can return to Azure Hollow." Even saying the name aloud felt like scraping open an old wound. That was the trade-off of choosing isolation. It gave me time to heal, but it didn't help me move on. And now that Everett was older, I was starting to realize how much of my grief I'd simply buried, not processed. "We don't have to leave," my mom started, her voice catching. But you should. I cut in gently but firmly. You can visit anytime. We'll be expecting you too. I added with a smile that felt thin, like the kind I used to wear when I played the role of Lina, all pleasantness and performance. We will dot as often as we can, she replied. Her words pricked something sharp inside me. I had made the decision already, but the ease with which she accepted it hurt. It confirmed my suspicion. She wanted to return home. To the pack I knew I could never set foot in again. A selfish part of me had hoped they'd push back. Give me a reason to delay, to cling to comfort a little longer. But I also knew they deserved this freedom just as much as I did. We all needed this change, even if it scared the hell out of me. I glanced towards the corner of the room where Everett lay asleep on the bed we shared. His soft brown hair, his father's hair, was tousled on his forehead, cheeks flushed pink from deep sleep. I hated the thought of shaking up his world, but I knew this would be good for him. Once the initial disruption passed, he'd thrive. I think I'll leave tomorrow. If that's all right, I said quietly. That's more than all right. My dad replied, take your time. My mom added, resting her hand over his. Her voice quivered at the edges. Later that night, I laid in the dark, listening to their muffled voices in the next room. Thoughts twisted and tangled in my mind. I felt like I'd lived 1,000 broken lives already. And now, at last, I wanted one that might finally hold. Chapter 14 read the following morning. I set out, driving the car that had been parked a short distance behind our little cottage. It made hauling groceries back a real hassle, but we'd recently started gardening and trying to produce as much as possible from the land itself. To reduce those trips, I wondered if, someday, I might find a place with a garden for Everett. I knew better than to expect anything with outdoor space right off the bat, especially on a tight budget. That thought twisted in my stomach. I hoped, above all, that I was making the right decision for him, honestly. I didn't have a clear plan about where exactly I was headed. How do you even begin finding a job or an apartment in the real world when you're starting fresh? All I had was the address of the community college in the city. The tuition was far more affordable than a 4-year university, and I figured it would be a decent place to begin. Maybe I could take a couple of summer classes to explore different subjects, and hopefully, that would give me a clearer sense of what I actually enjoyed. It seemed as good a place as any to start. If I could register for some classes, then I'd at least know the neighborhood well enough to look for a job without any experience. And maybe find a place to live, even without a paycheck yet. I took a steadying breath, telling myself to take one step at a time, finding a parking spot. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I couldn't remember the last time I'd worn makeup. Even just a swipe of mascara brightened my face in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. Not that it really mattered. My appearance wasn't going to determine whether I got in or not. My high school transcript was solid, and it was open enrollment, after all. The building was on the city's west side, an old red brick structure that might have been impressive once, but now looked faded with age. The neighboring buildings, taller and decked out in the steel gray hues and large windows common throughout the city, made it seem even older by comparison. Still, I found myself liking how the college stood out. I took that as a small, encouraging sign that I was on the right track. Inside, the harsh fluorescent lighting felt jarring. A group of young-looking people sat behind a table draped with a thin plastic cover, scattered with bright yellow and blue brochures and pamphlets. Hi! My attention snapped to a girl who couldn't have been much older than me, with sandy blonde hair pulled back into a ponytail. Her smile was wide and genuine. What can I help you with? I'm just looking to see if there are any classes that might be a good fit. I took some time after high school and honestly don't know what I'm interested in. I admitted, moving to stand across from her. You came to the right place. She handed me a few glossy pamphlets and a thick course catalog. I'd suggest starting with one class you think you'd enjoy. and then one you're unsure about. I know that sounds weird, but you'd be surprised how many people think they hate something just because of a bad high school experience. She shrugged, her bright smile never fading. I really like that idea. I smiled back, feeling a little spark of hope. Good. You can also talk to some professors. They're holding open office hours for the next couple of hours. She gestured down a hallway to her left. Come back if you need anything. Thank you. I clutched the papers to my chest, eager to dive into them right away. Well, she was peppy. A red-headed girl stepped beside me, making me jump. I hadn't even noticed her before. I smiled. She seemed nice. I wish I had that kind of enthusiasm for, well, anything. She shrugged with a wry, familiar smile. Same here, I admitted. Over the past few years, I'd felt enthusiasm for things in a very different way. Cassie, she held out her hand. My mom named me Cassandra for no good reason. She snorted, and I liked her instantly, so I chose Cassie, partly out of spite. She gave me a half grin. Ren, I shook her warm hand. Want to hear something worse than Cassandra? One eyebrow shot up. Renia, that's my full name. She stared at me for a moment. Her warm hazel eyes flecked with gold and green studying minds before she burst out laughing. Okay. You win. She motioned towards a bench behind us, and I followed her as she sat. Tossing her deep red curls behind her shoulders, we both started paging through the course catalog. When she noticed me folding down some pages, she handed me a pen dot. Is this your first semester? I asked after rereading the course list several times. There weren't many options, but they still felt overwhelming. Yeah, I figured I'd try something different. I had a bit of a rough patch in high school and just finished my GED. She looked at me. Years later, she added dryly, but with a small smile. Same, kind of. I took some time off after graduating and wanted to figure out what I wanted to do. I hoped today would help me get some clarity, but honestly, it just made me more confused. Everything sounds interesting. I want to do it all. I wish that was my problem. This bores me to death. She rolled her eyes, leaning back. I've been working at this diner, okay? They don't want us calling it that, but it's a diner. I just want something more stable. I have a daughter. She's almost 4, and it's all for her. I studied her face. Something softened when she mentioned her daughter. I understood why she hadn't finished high school the traditional way. I'm sure you'll find something you like that also pays the bills, I said, partly trying to convince myself. She snorted. That's the dream. She gathered her things and stood. Do you live nearby? I shook my head. This is just step 1. I still have to sort out jobs, daycare, and where we'll live. Not to mention picking a career, studying for it, and then finding a long-term job. She looked me over again, then her jaw tightened, like she'd made a decision. I don't know anything about apartments around here, but I might be able to help you with the other 2. A week later, everything was packed. Everett's and my belongings were loaded into my dad's car. They'd come back to pick up their boxes once I was more settled, or as settled as I could be. I took one last look at the cottage. It was barely a shadow of what it had been just a week before. The windows were shuttered and boarded, making the bright little home seem dark and lifeless. All the small personal touches we'd added over the years were boxed up, leaving only the bare bones of the space behind. It reminded me of when we first arrived, broken and pregnant. Over time, we made this place a home. I, along with the cottage, had grown into something new and less empty. I shut the door behind me, taking a final glance, not wanting to imprint this moment on my mind forever. Chapter 15, Mama. Everett's small voice pulled my attention, and I bent down to scoop him up. Where are we going? He asked yet again, for what felt like the 100th time. On an adventure, I replied with a gentle smile, planting a kiss on the tip of his nose. Are we leaving forever? A tiny frown furrowed his brow. No, sweetheart. We can always come back. We're just heading somewhere new to make some friends and meet new people. Doesn't that sound nice?" He shrugged, then buried his face into my chest. He was growing fast. Carrying him was starting to wear on me. But I cherished these moments when he still felt like my little baby. I rubbed the back of his head and held him close, wanting to shield him from every harm, but knowing I couldn't. This is it. My dad pulled up in front of the building that would become our new home. I had managed to get the keys thanks to a security deposit my parents gave me. I fought them over it, insisting I wanted to do this on my own. But deep down I knew I couldn't. My modest savings had gone to admission fees. But tuition was still on me. Cassie had helped me land a job at the restaurant where she worked. I hadn't even needed to show up for an interview. Apparently, they were desperate for staff. And my lack of experience didn't matter. The apartment wasn't much, but it was affordable for the area. Up and coming, Dad called it, with a hint of optimism. 2 small rooms and a single bathroom were more than enough for Everett and me. The place used to be some kind of warehouse, and I liked the open floor plan. It vaguely reminded me of our old cottage. It felt modern despite its flaws. I knew the openness was mostly because it was cheaper to leave it that way than to install new walls. And insulation. This place is going to get cold coming winter. Dad tapped on one of the windows. "I'll come back and see what I can do before then." Mom looked around with a mixture of sadness and pride. "Well, this isn't bad. Not bad at all," she said, frowning at patches of exposed bricks that were obviously not part of any design trend. But I kind of liked it. It gave the place an industrial vibe, something people pay a premium to imitate. I'll make it cozy. Add some nice touches so it doesn't feel so bare. I glanced at the plain white walls. "Everett," I called. He was darting between the kitchen and living room. "Want to see your room?" He stopped and rushed over to me. "I have my own room." His eyes sparkled with excitement. "You do?" I nodded and held out my hand, which he took eagerly. "It's empty right now, but I thought you could help decide what goes in there. Maybe even paint it." His wide eyes made me feel like I was doing something right. I was both excited and annoyed as I headed to my first shift at the diner. It pulled me away from furniture shopping. While my parents took Everett out to hunt for thrifted pieces to fill the space, I didn't care much about appearances, but I wanted to be part of that moment. Ding dong. Cassie knocked on my open front door frame. "How did you even? You texted me your address and left the door unlocked." She smiled, stepping inside with her hands on her hips, surveying the place. Great space. Really big for this part of town. I wasn't sure if she was being serious. "Come on." She nodded toward the door. "Don't want you late for your first shift." She strode ahead as I grabbed the keys and fumbled with the unfamiliar lock. The diner was just a few blocks away. Cassie showed me where she lived. A few blocks past it, where Everett would stay while I worked. She had a babysitter for the summer since her daughter's preschool was out. Splitting the cost would be way cheaper than daycare. If I could have found one that even had openings, I took it as a sign. Cassie was my fairy godmother, maybe a slightly dark one, but she stepped in offering not just a job, but a solution for Everett. I wanted to believe the moon goddess hadn't forgotten me after all. It was a blessing everything was within walking distance. My college was about 30 minutes away. The diner, 10, and Cassie's place another 10 after that. Public transportation was decent, but unreliable, according to Cassie. And I didn't mind walking anyway. My first shift was a whirlwind. I hadn't expected it to be so physically demanding, running back and forth, juggling orders, carrying trays, trying to remember everything. By the end, I was mentally and physically drained. It's not always this hectic. Weekdays have a breakfast and lunch rush, but otherwise it's pretty slow. Cassie dumped some plates in the kitchen as I brushed past her. "Go ahead and sit down. You're done for today." I pulled off the pink apron, grateful I could wear my own black clothes underneath. But I was nervous something like that would ride up. So I'd opted for a short-sleeved shirt and black jeans I'd packed ages ago. Here, Cassie slid a brown envelope across the counter. I opened it, eyes wide. She leaned back on the counter. It's not much part of my tips for helping you out. You technically get hourly paid during training. But she shrugged. Thank you. I stuffed it into my pocket. The money, even if she thought it was small, was more than I expected. If I could keep this up for at least 5 or 6 shifts, I'd be able to cover rent and classes. It'd be tight, but doable. Our shifts will match for now. I made that a requirement with the boss. Most of them are day shifts after the breakfast rush. Drop Everett off at my place, and we can walk here together. I nodded, but looked away. Look, I get it. It's going to be tough having him away from your parents when that's all he's ever known. But he needs a routine. Her gaze locked onto mine as I bit my lip. She was right, Dodd. It was going to be harder than I imagined. But I was doing this for him, for us. And that made it all worthwhile. I collapsed onto the couch that night. My parents had surprised me with new mattresses for Everett and me. I was genuinely thrilled. Sleeping on some unknown previous owner's old mattress never sat right, especially for my son. Everett was already fast asleep on his new bed. My parents were sleeping in my room, as I insisted. But Mom still set up the couch with fresh sheets and pillows. I fell asleep the instant my head hit the pillow. Chapter 16 Alpha Darius Apollo, my wolf, grew more restless by the day. We still hadn't found our mate. And at this point, I'd visited nearly every pack within hundreds of miles around Cypress City. I was starting to wonder if mine wasn't in this damn country or if I'd simply been denied one. Still, I was determined to find her. If the moon goddess hadn't forgotten me, if I weren't an alpha, a prince no less, I'd have made it my life's mission. But unfortunately, I had other responsibilities, many of them. Sex had lost its appeal. No matter the partner, I couldn't find the release I craved. I rubbed my hand over my face, hoping to banish those frustrating thoughts. Mr. Darius, my secretary, appeared in the doorway, impeccably timed as always. What? Mr. Dorian is requesting a meeting. He's following up on an email he sent. Now, I asked. Yes. Your schedule is clear for the next hours. I sighed. Mr. Darius? Send him in. I sat up and adjusted my tie. Mr. Darius, I won't take much of your time. He stood before my desk, and I gestured for him to sit. The girl, the woman, you asked us to keep track of just appeared. I leaned forward, my weariness melting away. He had my full attention. She rented an apartment we own on the Lower West Side. He slid a lease agreement across the desk, signed by Renia Barnes. I snatched it up too quickly. Anything else? I asked without looking at him. That's all for now. It just came through. I'll keep you posted if she shows up in our system again. He stood, and I nodded him out. For the first time in ages, my wolf felt calm. Within days, I fell into a routine. It was more chaotic than I'd grown used to over the years, but it felt good to be busy and gave me little time to dwell on the darker thoughts lingering in my mind. Every morning, I dropped Everett off at Cassie's before we walked to work together. Her daughter, Lilith, got along great with Everett. They were less than a year apart, and Everett didn't see her as a baby. Work was the hardest adjustment. I studied the menu during slow moments, but still couldn't memorize all the combinations after work. I picked Everett up, and my parents, Everett, and I made dinner together. Mom seemed more attached to him now that they were preparing to go home, and I almost thought she might ask to move in with us. I finally registered for classes, but they wouldn't start until summer term, so I had a few more weeks to settle in. I hoped our apartment would feel more like home by then. There were still so many kitchen items and things for Everett's room we needed. The list kept growing each day. It was his first room alone, and I wanted him to love being there. I'd live on a mattress in a bare room for a year, if that's what it took to make his space perfect. We're going to look at a kitchen table and chair set and a kid's bed. Mom handed me a mug of coffee while Dad helped Everett get dressed. I knew I'd miss their help more than I could express. Let me know the cost. I'll pay for it or reimburse you. I took a long sip, willing the caffeine to cut through my exhaustion. Each day left me drained physically and mentally, and it was harder to shake the fatigue before the work rush kicked in. Don't worry about it. Mom smiled warmly. We can sort it out later. Mom, I set the mug down on the counter. I seriously appreciate all your help. But you've already paid the deposit, first month's rent, new mattresses, sheets, everything. I've got the rest. My parents didn't have much saved, living in a pack. Many things were taken care of for you. They'd worked before, but hadn't in years since we moved out. I knew they were dipping into their savings. Okay, I'll let you know. She nodded, but I wasn't convinced. I said goodbye to them and took Everett's hand. His shorts were creeping above his knees, so I added new summer clothes to my mental to-buy list. What do you think you'll do today with Lilith and Sabrina? Sabrina was their nanny. She had grown kids of her own, and we immediately fell in love with her. She was like a second mom, and I trusted her completely. I think maybe the park. Everett shouted, the big one with the black fences all around. Well, that sounds like the best day ever. I can't wait to hear all about it. He chattered nonstop until we reached Cassie's apartment, where she buzzed us in, something I wished my place had. Her apartment was smaller, but in a nicer part of town, with a playground and parking just minutes away. Let's do this, Cassie sighed, closing the door behind her. Guess what? She raised an eyebrow. That meant anything could follow. An engagement, a new obsession with chickpeas. Who knew? What? You're officially off training. Welcome to the team, Ren. She gave me a sly smile. It's all I ever wanted, I said dryly. She laughed and led the way down the stairs. It was nice having a friend again. Leah was great, but it was different having someone physically present who understood this new version of me. It felt freeing. I was nervous, but excited to finally be on my own and start making real tips, not just the ones Cassie shared. I felt guilty, but she insisted, and I wasn't quite guilty enough to say no. I desperately needed the money. I donned the ugly pink apron and headed to my section. I was on counter duty, which I appreciated. It was the easier section, less running. I got to work immediately, checking the coffee pots and brewing fresh batches. The bell jingling at the door barely drew my attention anymore, but then the atmosphere shifted. Background chatter stopped. Customers and servers alike seemed to freeze in place after the breakfast rush. A beep from a coffee machine pulled me back to the task, and I kept my eyes on the counter, waiting for a customer. I hoped the smell of coffee would help wake me. Standing close to the pots filling at an agonizingly slow pace, my body did awaken as the caffeine kicked in. Every fiber alert when a scent hit me, sweet yet woody, perfectly balanced between strong and gentle. I spun around, confused as my senses sharpened. My eyes locked on a pair of icy light blue ones. My wolf, Ivory, danced wildly in my mind, whispering words I thought I'd never hear again. Mate. Chapter 17. I staggered backwards, relieved that I wasn't clutching anything fragile. Otherwise, it would have shattered on the floor. My back bumped against the counter, and there was nowhere left to retreat. Around us, the usual diner noise resumed. The murmurs of conversations, the clatter of dishes, servers bustling about. Had I really just imagined that moment of stillness, as if time itself paused? Ren? Cassie's voice drifted toward me, distant and concerned. My throat tightened, and I pushed past her, slipping out the back door. I didn't know what exactly I needed to flee, to escape this place. I craved something solid, something to cling to amidst the dizzying shock overwhelming me. Inside my head, my wolf whined insistently, desperate to be reunited with our mate. I tried to silence her, but it was futile. I'd never considered the idea of a second chance mate before. Not once in the 5 years. I'd been consumed by grief and anger, fully devoted to Everett. One thing I was sure of, I didn't want another. Not now. A cold, creeping dread settled over me, and I wasn't sure if it was mine or my wolf's. Why would the goddess be so cruel as to gift me a second chance at the worst possible moment, just as I was finally standing on my own 2 feet? Was she really intent on tossing me into the arms of some other man? Don't reject him, Ivory whispered in my mind. I shook my head. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind yet, but he could reject us. And I wasn't sure I could survive that heartbreak again. I heard a door creak open, but I stayed rooted where I was, hugging my knees to my chest. I didn't care that I was sitting in the grimy alley behind the diner, a space only used for smoke breaks and garbage bins. Logic didn't matter right now. Cassie appeared above me, hands planted firmly on her hips. "He's gone," she said, as though she already knew. She reached down, offering her hand. I hesitated, then accepted it reluctantly. What was that all about? She leaned against the building. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. But if he's some ex or a guy you never want to see again, I'll make damn sure he never sets foot near the diner. No questions asked." I shook my head. How could I explain that I didn't know him, had never met him? Yet somehow he was fated to me. The absurdity almost made me laugh. "No, he's fine. I just didn't expect him." She studied my face carefully, like she didn't quite believe me. "Seriously, it was just a shock. He hasn't done anything to hurt me, I swear. Not yet, at least." I sighed quietly to myself. The rest of my shift was a torment of nerves. My eyes kept flicking to the door, torn between hoping he wouldn't come back and maybe hoping that he would. Focusing was difficult, but I managed to make it through. Afterwards, Cassie and I counted our tips. I slipped the money into my pocket, reminding myself to open a bank account this week while my parents were still in town. "Look, Mama, look." Everett came running out of his room just minutes after we got home. Grabbing my hands, I followed him to where my parents waited. In the middle of the room stood a small bed with a matching nightstand, the whole space still smelling faintly of fresh paint. The stark white walls had been transformed into a deep blue. Dad smiled, arms crossed. "It still needs to dry a little. Tomorrow I'll hang the curtains." He picked the blue himself. "I know it's a bit dark, but he shrugged. And look," Everett tugged on my arm again, pointing to a box with a constellation-themed night lamp on it. "Grandma said it makes stars on the ceiling." "Thank you," I whispered, my throat thick with emotion. Knowing he had a place he could truly call his own made this move so much easier. I promised myself I'd get him some books and toys this week, if I earned enough. It's perfect. I let Everett guide me around the small room as my parents quietly slipped out. "To give us some privacy, you chose this color?" He nodded, beaming. Grandpa let me look at all the paint and wallpaper samples. He furrowed his brow. "Paint samples? Yeah, the little paper ones. I picked this one." His pride was unmistakable. "It's perfect. Tomorrow we'll get everything set up. I promised. We can have a sleepover on the couch tonight while the paint dries. How does that sound?" I ruffled his hair. That evening, we sat around the kitchen table they'd brought over that day. They promised to find me a bed and a nightstand for my own room before they left. I tried not to dwell on the fact that their visit was ending soon, but I felt endlessly grateful for their help. Without them, I had no idea how long it would have taken to furnish the place, or even how I'd have gotten everything home. They asked about my day, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them about meeting my second chance mate. Saying it aloud made it all too real, and I wasn't sure whether to feel angry, confused, or something else entirely. Later, I laid on the couch with Everett in my arms. For the first time since moving, I didn't fall asleep from exhaustion. My mind churned, swirling with thoughts I couldn't make sense of no matter how long I stayed still. "You good?" Cassie asked when we neared the diner the next day, noticing I'd fallen silent. I nodded, but I knew she didn't buy it. She wasn't about to let it go, determined to have a calmer shift than yesterday. I set about prepping my section, wiping down the counter, making coffee, folding napkins, getting ready for the lunch rush. Even though it was still hours away, I almost lost myself in the work until my body tensed before I even caught his scent or saw him walk in. I forced myself not to bolt. My muscles locked up, and I wasn't sure I could even run if I wanted to. This time, I barely noticed the other patrons or servers. My gaze was fixed solely on him, finally allowing myself to look at him properly. His hair was dark, pitch black, matching his perfectly groomed beard. His features were sharp and commanding, but it was those intense, stormy blue eyes that truly stood out. He carried himself with an undeniable authority, an aura I couldn't quite put into words, but felt deep in my bones. Without pausing, he strode towards me, his eyes locked on mine until he sat directly across from me, his face nearly leveled with mine. "Coffee," he said, more a command than a question. I raised an eyebrow. "Please," he added, softer this time. I turned to grab a mug and poured him a cup from a fresh pot, sliding it across the counter. "Cream or sugar?" I asked. He shook his head. "You're going to want something. The coffee here's crap," I said frankly. A brief shadow of a smile flickered across his face, but it vanished before I could be sure. "Cream then," he waited. "Please," he added. I nodded and grabbed some cream for him. This ordinary exchange felt strange, charged somehow. Every fiber of me was drawn to him. I wondered if he sensed the bond as deeply, or if it was just a fluke. He didn't seem to. "Thanks." He took the cup, his fingers brushing mine. The sudden contact jolted me, and I pulled away reflexively. His eyes followed where my fingers had touched him. He must have felt it, too. Thankfully, another customer sat at the far end of the counter, so I went to help them. Even from a distance, I couldn't shake the awareness of him. When I returned, he looked up before I even reached him, as if he'd sensed me coming. "Can I get you anything else?" I asked, hoping my voice sounded steady. "No." He shook his head. "No thanks." He added the last words with a slight smile. "Okay then." I turned to leave. "Wait." His voice was gravelly, making my stomach drop. I turned back slowly. He took a breath, his brows knitting briefly. Then his expression settled into the same cool neutrality I was sure he wore often. "Yes?" I prompted. "You're my mate." His voice lowered, the statement absolute. I nodded slowly and leaned closer, closing the space between us so no one could overhear. His breath hitched. "You're my second chance," I admitted. His eyes widened for a moment before comprehension dawned. He gave a single nod. "I don't know how to feel about this. I wasn't even looking for anything. I didn't think it was possible for me," I said, cutting straight to the heart of it. "Do you even want a mate?" I asked, unsure if I really wanted to hear the answer. His face shifted subtly, but I couldn't read his thoughts. "You don't?" he finally asked. I swallowed hard, noticing he hadn't answered my question. "I'm not sure anymore. I just got out of something. I feel like I need some time alone." He blinked once. "I understand." I studied him, but his face remained unreadable. "Can I take you out on a date?" he asked. That caught me off guard. I hadn't expected that. I said I need time alone. I offered a half smile. "That's not being alone." He shrugged, almost imperceptibly. "You didn't answer the question." "I don't think so. Not right now." I shook my head. "I'm sorry. I've got too much to sort through to think about this." His face fell briefly, making me want to take it all back. I felt selfish, but I knew I had to be. I deserved it. "Friends," he suggested. I studied him. "You don't seem like the type who has many friends." My bluntness surprised me, as did the ease I felt talking to him. Even with Noah, it had taken weeks before I could say more than a few words. That faint smile appeared again. He shook his head once, almost as if to wipe it away. "You're not wrong, but the friends I have tolerated me." I smiled back. "Fine." I reached out my hand. Ren Barnes. His large palms engulfed mine, sending warmth and sparks coursing through me. reminders of the first time Noah had claimed me, wrapped me in his arms. I pulled back, maybe too quickly, cradling my hands in the others. I hadn't expected the memories to hit so hard, but I guess that was natural. He looked worried for a moment. Callum, he met my gaze. That's my name. I smiled. I figured as much. Well, Ren, I'm glad to meet you. I looked forward to our friendship. One eyebrow arched, and it sent a small burst of electric pleasure through me. There was so much to figure out. I'd been rejected. Now a single mother working a restaurant job just to pay for a few community college classes. There wasn't anything about me that screamed catch. My smile faltered. I knew better than anyone that the mate bond wasn't foolproof. The initial sparks and attractions alone weren't enough. Not that I even wanted a mate. But the fear of falling for this guy only to be rejected was terrifying. He pulled a wallet out and placed a 20 on the counter. No change, he said as I reached for it. I have a kid. He's 4. I'm a single mom. I'm taking classes because I don't know what I want to do with my life. Never really have. I blurted, not meeting his eyes. He paused. I clenched my fists, bracing for the sting of rejection. Okay? He said after an agonizing moment. He turned and started to leave. Conflicting emotions surged through me. Relief that he hadn't walked away, but worried that my words had scared him off. Yet, I didn't even know if I wanted him. He hesitated at the door, as if to say something, but then just walked out. What was that? Cassie asked, watching me stare after him. I had no idea. I slipped the money into my pocket and took the mug to the kitchen. She followed. Who was that? She asked. Callum, you really don't know him. She breathed. I said I didn't. HM. She turned on her heels. And I wished I knew what she was thinking. Chapter 19 Callum, her workplace was listed on her rental application. So I didn't have to go digging around like some stalker. I wasn't spying. I just needed to confirm where she was. The moment I stepped inside, her scent hit me like a tether, pulling every fiber of my being towards her. Even before I caught sight of her, she smelled like warmth itself, a comforting blend of fresh baked bread, mingled with something softer, more natural and green. It reminded me of wandering barefoot through a sun-drenched forest on a summer afternoon, the earth still warm from the sun's touch. Her scent stirred something deep in me. It was like walking barefoot on sun-soaked ground, moving toward a place that felt both familiar and thrilling. This was my mate. I had no doubts, no second thoughts. She was meant for me. Apollo growled inside my mind, confirming what I had almost given up hope of hearing again. Over and over it repeated, mate, made a mate. At first, she didn't seem to notice me, and that sent a spike of unease through me. Everyone else, humans included, felt my presence. Even when I kept myself restrained, I sensed the subtle tension. The way eyes flicked away yet stayed glued on me. Everyone but her. Until finally, she turned with wide eyes that made me feel like I could finally breathe after years of suffocation. All the chaotic, restless thoughts flooding my mind suddenly quieted. Every negative feeling and doubt was pulled back. And I felt whole, maybe for the first time in my life. Her eyes were exactly as I remembered. Piercing green, a shade I'd never seen before. Not in this world. Her body stiffened, and I could sense her fear instantly, which stopped me dead in my tracks. She backed away, then spun around and almost stumbled as she ran from me. Shit, that was the exact opposite of how it was supposed to go. Apollo begged me to chase after her, but dread wrapped itself tight around my resolve and hardened into determination. She was the one I'd waited for, and I wasn't going to ruin it by chasing her down when she clearly needed space. I made brief eye contact with a woman nearby. Her dark red curls framed a face set in bored hostility. Her crossed arms and cold stare practically screamed, "Stay away." I swore I felt her eyes burn into me as I left. I didn't understand it. I knew she was mine now, and this time, I was sure she felt it too. What I'd sensed the first time we met was only a faint echo of this connection. I figured it was because she'd been bound to that other alpha, but now that bond was broken, and she was mine entirely, I would try again tomorrow, and every day after that, until she accepted me. The next day, she tensed as I approached, but this time she turned to face me and spoke. That was progress, far better than her running away, and I would take whatever I could get. Her hair was a different kind of black than mine. While mine felt trapped, dull and heavy, hers shimmered and reflected light, capturing everything around it. That was something I'd never noticed before. How a woman's small details could make her extraordinary. Yeah, Shakespeare, get a room, Apollo teased. I swore I'd walk away if he kept that up. You won't. Don't mess with my mate like that. Our mate. I shoved Apollo away, annoyed. Most people thought my wolf was the dominant one who often took over. But the truth was the opposite. Apollo was gentle, like a loyal puppy, and reminded me of what I could have been if I hadn't been burdened with responsibilities I never asked for. I watched her work, her hair pulled back into a long braid before she returned to me again. She seemed completely unfazed by my presence, the same as when I first met her. She didn't seem to feel the effect I had on everyone else. That night, everyone had stood when I entered the room. She had been so focused on something else on that alpha that she hadn't noticed. My real aura wasn't something anyone could choose to ignore. I could only assume it affected her differently because she was my mate. And it wasn't right for her to be afraid of me. You're my second chance, she admitted softly. I already knew it. Chapter 20, I didn't know the full story between her and that other alpha. But her admission confirmed what I suspected. It still baffled me why they had rejected each other. But I wasn't going to complain about that. I felt something even when she belonged to someone else. Maybe it was because the bond was unraveling. I didn't care. All that mattered was that she was free to be mine now. It was hard to keep myself calm when she ran from me, but it was better than her outright rejecting me. That's why I walked away. I couldn't face rejection without at least having the chance to talk to her. She told me she'd just gotten out of something, and well, that caught me off guard. It didn't surprise me. She was breathtakingly beautiful, and that word barely scratched the surface. She was so much more than just looks. I wanted her to understand this wouldn't be a fling or a short-lived thing. I was willing to do whatever it took to prove that to her. I have a kid. He's 4. I'm a single mom. I'm taking classes at community college because I honestly don't know what I want to do with my life. Never really thought about it before, she confessed, nearly stumbling over the words. She lifted her chin to meet my eyes, but wavered. She nervously bit her full bottom lip. Then her words sank in. She had a child. That didn't make sense. If he was 4, and I'd seen her about 5 years ago, the kid would have to be from her ex-mate. Unless, I didn't know what else it could be. But maybe there was someone else. Maybe that was why they rejected each other. Maybe it was her infidelity. I didn't want to believe my mate could so easily toss away a mate bond. But she hadn't accepted ours either. I get the truth from her when she was ready to tell it for the first time in a long while. I was stunned and speechless. Her having a kid wasn't a bad thing. I just couldn't piece together what had happened with her ex. It tugged at my memory. Wasn't the blonde pregnant during her Luna ceremony when I visited Ren? None of it made sense, and I hated the confusion clawing at me. Okay, I managed to say. I knew it wasn't the right response, but it was better than grilling her about her past while she was at work. Don't leave. We just found out we're dads. I shoved my wolf away again. I'd never really thought about kids. I doubted hers would like me, but I was willing to try. I wanted her, and that included every piece of her life, baggage and all. Don't call my pup baggage. Leave me alone for once in your damn life. I turned to walk away, every part of me resisting. It felt unnatural to leave her like that, but we'd be back tomorrow.